This is the Landlord Advocates, when we help landlords become better landlords. I'm your host, Matthew Lyman. Welcome. Landlords, we are using a different version of our videos today. We are not using our YouTube cameras, but we are using the programs that we use when we do live stream shows called StreamYard. We have upgraded our equipment, we've added lighting, microphones, all sorts of new equipment that will make our presentation to you a lot more professional. We have different camera angles now. This is our temporary studio coming to you from my home. It's our China closet room. Great. It works. We love it, but we are actually remodeling a big room in our home that will be used exclusively for our studio that will make our presentations with all of you a lot better. What we're coming to you from now today, or why we're talking with you today, is that a tenant advocate wrote an essay on July 30th, 2021, that is radical. This tenant advocate, her name is Cea Weaver. Cea Weaver is the loud voice of a coalition called the Housing Justice for All. This organization is comprised of tenant advocates, tenant advocacy groups, and tenants that have radical organizational ideas and radical plans to alter the landscape of real estate and landlording across not only New York, but across America. This essay, we were going to read it through, analyze it, and share parts of it with you. But it is so replete with so much falsehoods, misleading information, inaccuracies, radical ideas, fiction, radical ideas that we just felt that if we did not go through this essay, that we would miss out on things that all of you need to know about this woman and her agenda. So we're going to read through this, not all of it, but we're going to read through, and then we're going to stop, and we're going to show the perspectives of the landlord advocates and landlords, you across America, and how you would address her if she was in the room with you, reading this essay to you. And let's begin. She calls the essay "The Promises and Failures of the Cancel Rent Movement." Where does the housing justice movement go from here? 18 months ago, COVID-19 forced millions of people to reckon with a long-standing crisis of housing insecurity in the United States. Before the pandemic, millions of people could not afford their housing costs. Millions? Really, Cea? Millions? 75% of low-income families were paying more than half of their income on rent, and just 1 in 4 people who needed public rent assistance received it. By the fall of 2020, as many as 43% of the nation's renters were at risk of eviction. Well, Ms. Weaver, if that really is the case, then maybe those who are in that position need to rethink how they work, what they do with their money, and how they save their money. To say that this is a landlord problem is not right. This is not a landlord problem. This is a tenant problem. Now, yes, there are tenants out there that are genuinely having financial problems, and they are having a hard time making their rent payments. But to say that 43% are facing eviction, you clearly cannot claim that that is all at the hands of high rents, bad policies, bad landlords. Give me a break, Cea. It's not. It was in this context that the demand to cancel rent rippled across the country. And in New York, the housing movement was well prepared. Less than a year earlier, in June 2019, we had defeated the most powerful lobby in New York State, winning extensive tenant protections, sweeping protections, the strongest in the country. and expanded rent regulations for the first time in decades. In 2020, facing a deadly pandemic and an attendant economic crisis, the campaign to cancel rent animated hundreds of protests and rallies and the largest coordinated rent strikes in decades. Animated? Oh yes, Ms. Weaver, very animated. We watched these rallies, we watched these protests, we listened to these demands of tenants. Forget all the rent. Evictions are violent. Evictions kill people. No. Ms. Weaver, we have been in the eviction business for 30 plus years here in New York. And not one eviction has killed someone. Evictions are violent? Really, Ms. Weaver? How are they violent? How are they violent? You go into court, you're getting a warrant of eviction, the marshal or the sheriff is executing that warrant and telling the people that they have to leave. They're walking out the door of their property, either hopping into their car, a U-Haul, Ryder truck, whatever it might be, and they're taking their stuff and leaving. How is that violent? The Academy Award goes to Cea Weaver on that one, people. But despite the historic mobilization and the horrifying proportions of the crisis, New York State did not cancel rent. Well, of course not. What state is going to cancel rent? You can't cancel it. It's an obligation that you made. Whether you can pay it now or later, it's still your obligation. Pay it. They passed the ERA, as we all know, with $2.7 billion in money afforded to landlords to get that money from tenants. Now, here's what she says, and we have to agree with her. So far, the program has distributed a paltry number of checks. As the last count, it was about $117,000 in the state of New York. And in the state of New York, it was the last state in the nation to give out any money to any landlords. But this is actually quite prevalent across the United States, that many landlords are not receiving any money. They've been distributing about 6% of the money that has been allocated of the billions of dollars for landlords. She goes on to say, and it forces tenants and landlords to spend about 2 hours to apply if they're not blocked by minor technical glitches. Yes, we agree that there have been glitches, there have been problems. Absolutely there are. But to say that they spend about 2 hours to apply, Ms. Weaver, if these tenants owe $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 in rent or more, let's just go with they owe $10,000. Let's say it didn't take them 2 hours to apply, but 4 hours to apply. They get approved. The money goes to the landlord. The landlord got their money that was due to them. They shouldn't have to go through the application process. They shouldn't do any of that to get the money that's due them. That should be in the tenant. But let's say the tenant obviously did fill out the application and they were approved for the $10,000 and it took them 4 hours to do it. Well, Ms. Weaver, that means the debt that they owe is gone and placed on the backs of taxpayers, not the tenant, where it should solely reside, not on the backs of taxpayers. That tenant made $2,500 per hour to fill out this application, and that's saying 4 hours. We're going, let's go with the 2 hours that you claim. That's $5,000 an hour to fill out the application. Ms. Weaver, I would be glad to sit behind my desk and make even $500 an hour, but to make $2,500 or more, oh yes. Don't act, Ms. Weaver, that this was so painful for them to do that they had to fill out an application for 2 hours. Oh gosh, that was so bad. Who really cares? The challenges associated with ERAP are disappointing but not surprising. They stem from deep structural problems with New York's long-standing approach to housing subsidies that cancel rent sought to address. We go on to, the phrase cancel rent is deceptively simple. Over the course of 18 months, it came to mean dividends, strategically and functionally, to different sectors of the housing movement. At various points in the year, at least 3 cancel rent bills were active in the state legislature of New York. The bill is supported by the Housing Justice for All Coalition, introduced by Senator Julie Salazar and Assembly Member Uline Nyo, would have universally cleared COVID-19 rent debt automatically, removing the stress of arrears for hundreds of thousands of tenants. So this bill would have removed the obligation for tenants to pay all of this rent back to the landlord. The stress, this reality, you have to pay the bill. So goes on to property owners, not tenants, would have to apply for the aid. Right, so the property owners do the money, and your idea is that the property owners should have to apply and go through all the rigmarole to get the money that is due them, and the tenants should not have to apply at all. No. So forgive all the rent that they owe, and make the tenant or make the landlord apply for the money that's due them. So remove even more responsibility from the tenants and put it onto the backs and the shoulders of the landlords. That's what you're asking for. It goes on, it's even worse. Their eligibility would be determined by the rental income they received during the pandemic and the overall health of their portfolio. Ms. Weaver, are you serious? So if a landlord was frugal with their money, frugal with their expenses, frugal with how they spent the money, and was able to survive this pandemic financially, even when tenants not paying the rent, if their portfolio is strong, then maybe, in your assertion here, that they should not receive any money at all. Because they're doing quite well as it is. Now you might say, Matt, does she really mean that? Yes, she does. Because here's why. So that mom and pop landlords who are truly suffering would have back rent cleared and could even earn a modest return on the investment. Now when you say landlords who are truly suffering, all right, listen here, Weaver. A lot of tenants were not suffering. Between the unemployment money that they were getting, somewhat put under the table, the stimulus money coming through, and not one penny paid on rent that was due, they were not suffering. But because New York State passed the COVID Emergency Housing and Eviction Prevention Act of 2020 and 21, with the Declaration of Hardship, they didn't have to prove a damn thing. They're going to sign it and say, yeah, we're suffering, with no proof. But here you're saying that landlords had to truly prove that they were suffering. But not the tenants. Real nice, isn't it, Weaver? Real nice. And a modest return on their investment? Who are you to determine what return on the investment they should get? If they're making a 75% return, a 10% return, 50%, that's none of your business what return they get. To determine that it should be modest and modest only, you claim to be against capitalism, you're pro for socialism, you support socialism, but yet here you are dictating on how much money somebody should be making. Private equity giants like Blackstone, I don't know who they are, but Blackstone, who accrued billions in returns during the pandemic period, would be forced to forego collection on rent. Forced to forego. So because these people, Ms. Weaver, have money, they earned it, it's money due them, but because they have lots and lots of money, they would be forced to forego the rent that is due them. How dare you? Who do you think you are to say that they should not be compensated for that which is due them? How dare you? Landlords will be required to regulate rents and comply with the eviction protections. This is what we said in the earlier videos, the Smoke and Mirrors video on our YouTube channel, that you have to accept this money when it comes to you, and when it does, it comes with all kinds of provisions and stipulations that you as a landlord must follow, and if not, you can be in trouble for not doing so. And that's what she's pushing for. Some proponents and detractors alike saw cancel rent as merely a messaging and strategy to capture the public imagination and motivate tenants to take actions. Others understood it as a strategy to demand the impossible, and in doing so, to increase the chances of winning a straightforward budgetary demand from the state to spend billions of dollars to pay accumulated back rent. For housing justice for all, it was not an impossible demand, but a call taken up in legislation at both the federal and state levels for a fundamental reorientation of housing subsidy programs towards a framework in which the state's role is not primarily to guarantee landlords' revenue streams, but to keep people in their homes. Like Ms. Weaver, we want the tenants to treat the homes that they're living in as their homes, but they're not. They belong to the real estate investor, the housing provider, the landlord. The cancel rent movement's effectiveness should be evaluated along all three of these lines: as a messaging strategy, as a strategy to win more funding for rental assistance, and as a strategy to transform the relationship between housing and public finance in New York. As a messaging strategy, cancel rent had mixed results. It was popular among the general public, especially those newly awakened to the country's rental crisis. And it achieved what digital organizers dream of. It went viral organically. The number of people engaging with Housing Justice for All social media platform exploded, allowing us to communicate with hundreds of thousands of new people. What that did, Ms. Weaver, is because those people that reached out to you were looking for ways to get out of paying their rent to their landlord, were looking for ways to not having to pay and to have somebody else pay it for them. That's why they went to your website. That's why they went to your Facebook page. That's why they sought you out. It's to find ways to get out of paying their obligations. But cancel rent was also polarizing and activated our opposition and served to erode pro-tenant coalitions inside the state legislature, where it was viewed with either skepticism or outright disdain. Oh yes, outright disdain you get from us landlords. Skeptics believe that the program is expensive and unrealistic, while detractors viewed it as benefiting the unworthy. For months, the real estate industry spun narratives about bad actor tenants who were undeserving of the support cancel rent would provide them. Here's where it gets bad. These narratives, based in racist welfare queen tropes, a liberal tendency against universal social programs, and long-standing valorization of property owners in our society, gained immense traction in the state legislature. Ms. Weaver, for you to invoke any level of racism into this is disgusting. It is out of line. There is nothing racist about this situation here. It is about landlords wanting to get the money that is due them, regardless of the race, the creed, the anything that makes up what a tenant is. It has nothing to do with their race, Weaver. It has nothing to do with it, but you bring up race to try to mobilize other people to your ideology and your cause. Well, hopefully the people out there will realize that it's a disgusting ploy on your behalf by you to scream racism as any factor in what has brought about this demise that landlords are facing and tenants' inability or desire not to pay the rent. Do not bring racism into this, Weaver. Do not. They were powerful enough to obscure actual data. The mom and pop landlords are few and far between. All right, Weaver, you are wrong. You are wrong, Weaver. Inside of New York City, yes. Mom and pops are probably far and few between. But outside of New York City and across America, most landlords are mom and pop landlords. They're not the big conglomerates that you think that they are. They're not the deep pockets, the super wealthy, the ones that can throw money away, throw it to the wind in a hurricane. They are not. Most landlords in America are mom and pop. And that renters are far less likely to have the savings necessary to weather sudden loss of income that property owners have than property owners. Okay, why should property owners be forced to bear the burden of the debts associated with their income properties when the income is not coming in? Why? Why should landlords be forced to dip into their IRAs, their retirement funds, their children's college funds? Why should they dip into their savings to pay this? Remember this, Weaver. It is the tenants that own landlords, not landlords that own tenants. Remember that. They were also powerful enough to divide the coalition of socialists, progressives, and moderates who shepherded through the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act in 2019, exposing factions within a Democratic supermajority in Albany and the limits of elected officials' willingness to fight for radical change. You don't think that the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act in 2019, Cea, was radical? Ask any landlord in New York State whether it was radical. It absolutely, without a doubt, was radical. Absolutely radical. How can it not be? It has put so many restrictions on landlords, it's not funny. As a strategy to expand rental assistance, the cancel rent movement was successful, both at the state and national levels. She launched Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader of the Senate and from New York State, with acquiring billions of dollars in aid to be distributed across the United States. That's what she's doing. She's giving credit to him for getting all this money to all across America for landlords. But she goes on to say that a key components of the cancel rent regulation, or legislation rather, support for undocumented New Yorkers and protections against rent hikes and evictions were included in legislation that became the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So undocumented New Yorkers, undocumented people in the United States qualify for this rental assistance, even though they're undocumented. That's a topic for another video, but it also puts into the minds of you watching, why is this happening? But while we have grown our movement and taken clear steps to soften the blow in the COVID-19 rent crisis, the campaign to cancel rent has not yet delivered a pat on New York's dysfunctional approach to housing subsidies. What more do you want, Weaver? What more do you want? Barnard economics professor Elizabeth Adanat put it well, she says. Our systems are built around these middle-class models where everybody has documentation for everything. Much of the world doesn't work that way, but most of the people who write laws live in the world that works that way. Oh, how unfortunate, Miss Adanat, Professor Adanat, and how unfortunate, Miss Weaver, that we live in a society that requires documentation if you want to get some form of assistance to help you in this world. Heaven forbid that you have to prove something in order to get something. Obviously, it seems that you and your professor buddy would like to eradicate those requirements and just give the money away. You state that later on in your essay, which we will be sharing with you momentarily, our friends and subscribers. Under our current system, tenants unable to report rent have few options. She goes on to state all kinds of statistics that those implying a family of three and those under $30,000, their chances of joining a housing lottery are 650 to 1 to get placed in subsidized housing. Well, here's what we say to that, Ms. Weaver. We're going to say that some people have families and they fall on hard times, yes. But we also know that there's many tenants out there that are already on hard times right now, have been for quite a while, and what do? they increase the size of their family. Why would you do that? If you are hurting financially, if you're hurting housing-wise, vehicle-wise, food-wise, and all of these other things that the socialists say that you are, then why are you creating bigger and bigger families to make your situation even worse? Well, with people like Cea Weaver, it doesn't matter, because they just want more and more taxpayer money to go towards supporting you and your ever-growing families. I'm reading through this because I don't want to read through everything that she has, so I'm glancing through what is in here so that we don't read everything. We're reading the important parts, and as we said, we're addressing them to educate all of you as to who this Cea Weaver really is and her allies. They go on to talk about vouchers and money for vouchers and how many are needed. But she goes on to say that the money, this affordable housing subsidy programs, and in short, the rental assistance, ultimately a subsidy for landlords, goes to those who need it most. But these subsidies that ultimately go to the landlords are coming from the landlords and other taxpayers. So some of these landlords are getting back some of what they're paying, but a lot of them are not. So you're saying, landlords, you should be happy that these subsidies are giving you rent. No, that's just going to increase the tax base. That's going to increase inflation. That's going to increase more people on these social welfare programs who are going to ask for more and more handouts at the expense of taxpayers. So taxes will go up. Insurances will go up. Those are variable rate mortgages will go up when you get this assistance that you claim is a subsidy for you landlords. You should be happy. In the long run, it's not. It's a detriment to not only landlords, but to America as well. Where do we go from here? For all of cancerous challenges, it's a call to stop the housing crisis by reorienting. The housing market has only become more necessary. She talks about how that if we don't stop this and extend the moratoriums past September 1st, there's going to be millions of evictions, and that some landlords are going to lose their properties, and it will consolidate the real estate industry by finance capital, meaning that larger companies will buy out the mom and pops, and therefore they will own all of this rental property. Well, Miss Weaver, let me tell you something. If that happens, they will have the deep pockets in order to fight the legislation that you so lovingly support. And then when they evict the tenants, they will have the deep pockets to hire the representation they need to get rid of the tenants and to go back and change the laws that are so terrible towards landlords and real estate investors across not only New York, but across America. Now, what she wants to do is she wants everybody to learn about the crisis and what has happened and things to learn from it. And one of the things that she wants us to all know about it is that we can, and in order to win lasting changes that do more than tinker at the edge during the emergency, we have to pursue bold demands that can bring more people into the organized housing movement, erode the power of the real estate industry, and build a coalition inside the legislature. In New York State, you have that coalition, Weaver. You have a strong coalition in New York State. For us landlords, we hope that will change in 2022. She mentions that they had this legislation called the Housing Access Voucher Program. She wants to see that passed. That is where it's a rental subsidy explicitly designed to address the shortcomings of the state's existing programs like ERAP. Existing programs with narrow income eligibility and excessive documentation requirements create a retributive relationship between recipients and the government. So what you're saying is that it takes a lot of effort to try to get free money to pay your rent. And therefore it creates animosity towards the government because the government wants the I's dotted and the T's crossed in order for you to get some money. Oh well, Miss Weaver. Oh well. They want to expand the constituencies of people eligible for housing assistance, especially undocumented New Yorkers, and are fully funded and implemented with a low to no barrier to entry to vastly expand the number of people who have positive rather than punitive relationships with government assistance. So what you're actually saying, Weaver, is that you want to have little to no barriers to people just going to the government and saying, gimme, gimme, gimme. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Well, of course, Weaver, if this were to happen, of course, the relationship between the government and the tenants who are receiving this assistance will be kumbaya. Because I'm getting money and I don't really have to do much for it. I have to go through hoops and hurdles to try to get money to pay my rent. I just go to the government and say, gimme, gimme, gimme. That's what you're saying, Weaver. Oh, disgusting. This program was now several malicious things, and in order to effectively address the root causes of the housing crisis, it must be paired with programs that limit rent increases and address power imbalances between tenants and landlords, like good cause evictions, and giving tenants the opportunity to purchase the buildings they now rent in. Like, we mentioned good cause evictions on our YouTube channel, The Landlord Advocates. It is kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, the truth behind good cause evictions. Now, you mentioned, Weaver, that it would allow the tenants the opportunity to buy the properties that they live in. Well, if the landlord is looking to sell, they'll sell to anybody who is willing to pay. But if you believe that the taxpayer should pay for the housing for these people to buy that they're living in, no. Do what all of us have done. Save money, take out loans, take out a mortgage, put down the down payment, and be a grown-up and take care of the responsibilities of what it is to be a homeowner. But if you're falling behind the rent and you destroy the property, why should you be a homeowner? Why should you be a real estate investor? If you don't respect the place where you live now, then why should you be given the opportunity to own something? You shouldn't. You should not. The state should also eliminate expensive subsidies to corporate landlords. If some landlords exit the market, the state can use an expanded capital budget, no longer drained by ineffective and costly corporate tax breaks, to acquire distressed properties and convert them into social housing. Bingo! Bingo! That is what many of us landlords have been saying from coast to coast. People like Weaver want to take the property from us landlords through these moratoriums, the CDC orders, this, that, and everything else that have plagued us for 18 plus months. If you look at the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of June of 2019, that eroded more and more property rights. And they're looking to do this more and more and more, which we are going to expand upon on our YouTube channel called The Landlord Advocates in future videos. But this clearly states right here that Weaver would like to see housing taken away from you and I and given to the government so the government can create social housing. One of the ideas that she had on a previous Zoom meeting or a previous something that I watched about her is that she wants to have cooperative type housing. That is where me or someone else that might make a lot of money every month will pay a certain percentage of their rent towards this cooperative where they live. The person 7 apartments down the hall will take their income and pay the same percentage. What this means is that where I might live, that might cost me $5,000 a month to live, might cost the person down the hall $500 to live in the same identical apartment that I'm living in. Ms. Weaver, it doesn't work that way. As hierarchical as this may sound, it is a fact. We work very hard to be able to live where we live. The tenants are living where they are living. But we should not be forced into a situation where we are paying $5,000 a month or $3,000 a month in rent, when the person 7 doors down is paying $300 a month. Explain to us how you believe that that's fair. Where is the incentive to move off the block, to move into the country, to move into the suburbs, to move into affluent neighborhoods? Where's the incentive when you tell us that, no, you're going to live here and you're going to pay X amount of dollars based upon your income? No, that's not how it should work. And we, as landlords, real estate investors, and housing providers, are going to fight that tooth and nail. A campaign for these 4 interventions can build a powerful coalition within the state legislature, addressing the shortcomings of a campaign to cancel rent. Collectively, the interventions would play a key role in addressing short-term housing insecurity, while also expanding tenant power and social housing. Again, she's a socialist. She wants social housing. I don't, Miss Weaver. I don't. Yes, it exists out there, and yes, we understand why. Some people need a helping hand. We fully support that. But when the people are offering you the helping hand, don't use your other hand to try to pull into the hole that we're trying to help you get out of. Don't do that. And that is what you seem to want to propose here, Ms. Weaver, is social housing. We don't like it, we don't support it, and we never will. We meaning the landlord advocates and landlords across America. Key priorities of the cancel rent movement is what we just stated. By providing both money to pay the rent and protections against retaliatory rent hikes and evictions, it would build the political power of tenants to organize for control over their homes. Like Ms. Weaver, like we said earlier, we want them to treat it like it's their home, but it's not. It's a temporary domicile when they pay on a cyclical portion every 30 to 31 days, a certain amount to live there. Treat it like it's your home, and we will allow you to live in it like it is your home. Destroy the property, not follow the lease, not pay the rent. It's your temporary domicile until we landlords evict you from that domicile. It would also build public support for the role that the government can play in addressing the housing crisis. It would represent a deep commitment to permanent and abundant operating subsidies. Yeah, just throw more money into it, Ms. Weaver. Throw more money. Where do you think that money comes from? The derivative of money, Ms. Weaver, is capitalism, which you don't like. You're a socialist. I don't like capitalism. It's awful. Socialism. Well, where do you think the money comes from, Cea? From the sky? Oops! That bag of money just almost hit me in the head. Whew, I was going to have a concussion there for a second. Glad it missed me. Where do you think the money comes from, Weaver? It comes from capitalism. And us capitalists are not going to be willing to give more and more and more money to those who don't appreciate capitalism, or are not willing to join the ranks of capitalists to make our America better. We're not going to do that. We don't support it. And you'll find that out in 2022 and in 2024, where there's a changeover in local, state, and American government. And by cutting tax subsidies to corporate developers to build market-rate housing, it would expand our capacity to build true social housing and help establish that the state is not in the business of creating limitless profit for the real estate industry. Limitless profit? Whoa, Miss Weaver, did you just fall down and hit your head when you stated that? I think you did. Limitless profit? Landlords across America are owed billions and billions of dollars in rent that they will never, ever see. Governments are imposing so many restrictions, so many regulations, so many codes put upon landlords, real estate investors, housing providers, that it makes that market not look so pretty for people who might want to enter into it. Remember, Ms. Weaver, the things that you want to have imposed upon homeowners, if you want tenants to become homeowners, they will be faced with those same things that you want today when they eventually buy their homes tomorrow. Over the last 18 months, tens of thousands of people have heard the call to cancel rent and join New York's housing movement and movements across America in states like California, as we all know. And as the saying goes, you can't unring a bell. All work is cut out for us to respond to housing instability, not with band-aids that prop up the status quo, but with policies that bring us closer to a fundamentally different housing system, and to work alongside politicians and policymakers to enact that vision. As Governor Cuomo and state legislators seek re-election in the coming months, we will be ready. And that's your essay. We're going to be sharing that essay on our social media pages, on our Facebook and Twitter page. Matthew Lyman and Facebook, you will see it on that. You will see it on Landlords Only, New York Landlords, and many other groups that we belong to, and many other Facebook pages. We're going to share this as much as we can. We're going to share this video on social media tomorrow. That will be Sunday, or actually August 1st. One more month when the moratorium is over with in New York State. And when the party is over for those tenants who believe that they should have got what they got over the last 18 months. And Ms. Weaver, when you state that you will be watching, and that you will be involved, and that you will be ready, remember this: the landlord advocates and landlords across America will also be ready to stand up for the rights of landlords, real estate investors, and property rights. Because when the rights are eroded away from us, they will be eroded away from others as well, from coast to coast. Until then, our fellow landlords, remember this woman, Cea Weaver. Cea Weaver. Cea Weaver. We have asked to debate her. We have told her that we want to debate her on social media. We've asked her to come on to our show. We are even willing to go to New York City, where she is, to debate her anytime, any day, anywhere. But we do not believe she is willing to take up that challenge. Why, Ms. Weaver? Because you're afraid of what we at the Landlord Advocates know and what we will share more and more across America. Until then, landlords, remember to subscribe to the Landlord Advocates on YouTube and continue to watch and support us, as we will support you in your future as a landlord, not only in New York, but in America. Until then, take care.